I was thinking about the whole business of zoos when I was a kid, and which is obviously when I first started being taken to the zoo, and things were very different in those days. Just sort of a bit of geographical history, as it were. The one that was, I lived in the edge of Manchester for a while, and we used to go to Bellevue. I don't know if anybody knows these, and whether they still exist, actually. Yes, no, still exist. But it was mainly a sort of theme park, basically, but that was the one thing. On the edge of Birmingham, I used to go to Dudley Zoo, and in London, I finally moved to London in the end of the 50s, beginning of the 60s, it was London Zoo, not Whipsnade, London Zoo. And at that period of time, I remember already there was quite a lot of opposition to zoos. It was a big controversy all the time. There were a lot of people, you know, wildlife people and whatever we call ourselves, celeb and all that, who were kind of didn't want to see animals in zoos. And there was often debates about it on the telly or on the radio. I remember David Bellamy. I thought, which way is he going to go? And I wasn't doing one, I think, at that stage. And him going, he was in favour of zoos. When I was a little boy, I remember getting the excitement of seeing these animals. And that's what turned me on. That's what got me interested. With his usual enthusiasm, he was very pro that. But I wasn't. Funny enough, I was not that comfortable. I remember this very clearly. Going to London Zoo, for one thing, for example, and seeing the bigger animals, for example, the elephants, in what was, you know, not much more than a concrete ring, really was quite small. And even the supposed sort of revolutionary and architecture, what was it, the Snowden Navy, and then everybody's seen that. When I went to see that for the first time, because I lived very close actually, Primrose Hill, I could actually see these weird towers going up. And I thought, that's terrible. It was one of the most ridiculous pieces of construction for birds, because it had all those pointy bits, yeah? All these little pointy bits going on. And birds would be terrified. Anybody who's been close to bird in captivity will know they were, or indeed when they got caught in the house or whatever, if they get into a corner, they panic, you know. So you go and you see the birds all bashing themselves at against the top of the aviary there. And it was quite clear that actually, I suppose people's attitude to zoos for quite a long time was mainly sort of entertainment. Mainly you went there to have a laugh at the animals. That's really the case. And I remember again standing there and everybody was just basically pointing at whatever they were looking at. Usually it was the monkeys, because then the chimpanzees tea party. It seemed to be not a good way to humiliate wildlife as far as I could see. I didn't like it. And I must admit I was pretty anti-zoo for a long time myself. But there was one element which came up very early on in those days, which was this idea that the zoo itself would say, yes, okay, we get people in, that's how we make money and everything else, we're not doing any harm. In some cases they were doing harm because they simply were not looking after those creatures. But they would say, we will take in rescue animals, as you were telling me you did here, and we will return them to the wild. You begin to hear that phrase. It came in quite late on, actually. So these animals belong in the wild. And some of the people who were anti-zoos, that was their credo. There was something sort of precious, something you know, almost pseudo-religious about it. These creatures do not belong in captivity. They belong in the wild. That's where they are, you know, it's their divine right to something like that. But something has changed over the years, and that something is continuing to get more and more so. And that is that the wild is probably the least safe place that you could put most of these animals. Now, I'm not suggesting we lock them all up, but if you look around at the world, and indeed at this country, at this point in history, the wild is a bloody dangerous place for wildlife. And we've seen the tigers today. We already heard the sort of figures that come out of India or wherever, you know, how many there are. It doesn't matter exactly how many there are, there are far fewer, but that isn't the point. It isn't the point. It isn't just that there's fewer of them, you know, less people can enjoy them or whatever. It's what is happening and why to those tigers. They are being killed in considerable numbers, and the reason they're being killed is to make money for some equally reprehensible things. A lot of that money, a lot of that profit goes to fund terrorism, and it goes to fund drugs, the drug traffic in quite a big way. And the actual point that the tiger comes into it, for any particular reason for itself, is simply as a rug, or made into some kind of Chinese medicine. It's all bad. I could actually understand it, having been to India myself, having scared the life out of myself, I've been close to a tiger, having actually had my best friend killed by a tiger in India. I'd be terrified, and I know a lot of Indians are terrified if they live in rural communities. Every year, a lot of people are killed by tigers. A lot of people are killed by elephants, probably even more. Quite a lot of people are killed by hippos, you know, but in a weird sort of way. I can understand it. If people were panicking and say, well, that's why we don't want the tigers here. We're scared. But it isn't that. It's to make vast amounts of money for very criminal activities all around the world. The same applies, of course, to the elephant trade and the ivory. We've all seen those terrible pictures of elephants having literally been sliced in two, you know, the head taken off, or just stolen the tusks and then leave the corpse and that sort of. I'm afraid it's happening on a very big scale. And nevertheless, I guess, so basically, I suppose what I'm saying on that one is that with these big exotic animals, as it were, they are much safer in a zoo. I'm not suggesting what's what we do, go out and grab them all and bring them back, kidnap them, quick, bring them over here, they'll look a lot safer. But that is the fact, they are actually safer in captivity, where they're being wonderfully looked after, because most zoos now the standards are extremely high. And I often think, actually, it wouldn't surprise me if there wasn't a waiting list. You know, if you've got tigers writing in, is there any chance of coming to your zoo? Because it's a lot safer than India. And it's true. And I think they would. You know, they actually live longer in captivity. And when you've got a well-designed enclosure, as if you get a chance to go to London Zoo or London Zoo, and go and have a look at their new tiger enclosure. It's absolutely amazing. With wonderful, great big area. You can, you know, go from room to room, as it were, and climb on things and swing on things. You know, it's terrific, actually. And quite uplifting. But how about this country? Because you said this started with a lame jackdaw being brought in, as it were. Well, how about in this country? Is it safer in the wild for British wild animals than it is to be in captivity? Well, I think I would have said just about until this last couple of years. I would have said just about until this particular government came in to power. And I might have said just about until Owen Patterson took over as minister, who was basically in charge of our wildlife. And I'm here to say that I think this is probably the worst government we have ever had in terms of doing anything for British wildlife, for the countryside, etc., etc. I'm not going to go on a great deal about it, but my God, I could. And I have, and I will. But I think it is absolutely criminal and evil what Patterson and his cronies, and that includes Cameron, who are all on the same side. It includes the rich end of the farmers, I'm afraid. Farmers union involved in it as well. Basically, this country's countryside and its animals is being run by a bunch of rich, overprivileged, arrogant, ignorant, posh people, half of whom went to eat as they have. That's not a clear statement, it's a fact. And and they're extremely dangerous to our countryside. They don't care whether we have access to the countryside. Apart from anything else, quite a number of them own a large chunk of it, because they have great big estates and so on and so forth. They don't need to worry what's happening out there, whether normal people can actually get into the countryside. No, because they've got a shooting weekend with a couple of the royal family. I think it's hideous what's going on at the moment, and I'm very happy to spend most of my time doing what I can, and what that is, I don't know, but to get rid of this lot. And you're going to have a queue of badgers probably tonight as well when I come here too. I went down to one of the badger call situations the other week, you know. The people defending those badgers are not extremists, they're not dangerous, they're not sort of anarchists or anything like that. They're lovely people, a huge range of people of all ages and all types who are behaving themselves, but they're upset and they're incensed. And they're quite right to be so. Well, that's all I can politics. So, it's been lovely to come here. We're all going to get blown home by the sound of it. And it's uplifting. You know, I'll go from the situations, generally just to encapsulate, I'll go from the situation, when I was younger, a teenager, zoos kind of creeped me out. I honestly have to say that. Nowadays, it's quite the opposite, because you meet people who are doing some terrific work. I think we're going to hear a little bit about it, so I won't bore about that, but the whole business of education, not just making sure that kids are interested, although it did strike me actually, because we never had anything like this when we were kids. Oh, nothing. Funny enough, I had to sign a copy of the Observer's Book of Birds earlier today. That's the only bird book there was when I was a child. That one, you know. And there was nothing interactive, there was no television, there was certainly nowhere where you could go and be shown everything, etc., etc. Maybe, if there had been, the country might not be quite such a mess as it is, I don't know. And maybe now that there is, it will be better for the next generation, maybe not. I'm not sure, I'm not sure. I don't think any of us can be sure at this point. But I do know that the integrity and the knowledge and the expertise of zoos in the United Kingdom, and generally speaking around the world, although there's terrible ones still going in some parts of Europe and America and so on and so forth, but generally Britain's got a pretty good record. And if a zoo is not keeping up the standards, they soon get clobbered, don't they? I think that's true to say, and that's great, you know, there's a great deal of integrity. So I'm delighted to come today. It's lovely to get out, lovely to meet you all. Thank you. I'm sorry it's probably been a little bit more serious than you expected, but I can't help it these days. That's what's happening. Thank you very much.